So, hi everybody. Once again, Bruce Kim has kindly agreed to join us today, and he's got his PowerPoint working. So, this is Bruce Kim from K25 here in Korea, served as a Peace Corps member. And what years were those, Bruce?
72 to 74.
Okay, 72 to 74.
Hmm.
So take it away, Bruce.
Thank you, Frank. Thank you so much. And it's nice to see many of you that I had the chance to meet, the privilege to meet the other month out here in Portland. Um, yeah, Frank asked me to do this, and I thought, like, why me? But he's very persistent. So I finally, consented to do it. But again, this is from my perspective. Everyone has their own perspective, on their service as volunteers, especially in Korea. And I just want to leave the caveat, that this is only my perspective and my experience, how I experienced Korea as a Peace Corps volunteer. And I'm not speaking for any other volunteers, nor would I be, audacious to do something like that. Everyone has their own experiences and their own truth as to what happened during their service. So I think, as I told the rest of the group, you know, when I was in Korea, I got sent to a town called Samcheonpo, Korea, which is in Gyeongsang-namdo, and it's on the ocean, about as far away from Seoul as you can get. Um, and this is our training group. We trained in Chuncheon. All I remember of that training was extremely cold, really cold, and tons of snow.
Yeah, over on the left side, right there. Just
Yeah.
sit down, honey. Sit down. You're a distraction. Okay.
And then um, we were there from like the end of November 72. We arrived in country and to various sites like tanks pointing out on the Hangang Bridge and machine guns all over the place, armed troops. And it was kind of disconcerting. And I think the next day they took us up to the 38th parallel, and that was another kind of weird experience, seeing all the North Korean guys dressed in their bear hats, pointing their AK-47s at the bus as it drove by. Um, but then we headed off to Chuncheon, and we trained there until I think early February or something like that. And that was a big introduction to Korea for all of us. I think even for me, a Korean American from Hawaii, it was still a big cultural shock and change, lifestyle change from what we had been used to, as you all know. So this is Samcheonpo in 1973, when I probably early when my service there, and this is the harbor for the little town at low tide. So there's extreme tide changes there where the tide completely went out. And I don't know, like orientation wise, but the nearest big city to Samcheonpo is Jinju, which was about 45 minutes to an hour away by small bus. And so we had to either come by bus or by train, usually by bus to Jinju, and then change to a small bus, a country bus, to make it down to Samcheonpo back in 73 and 74. And this is the harbor with actual water in it. And these primarily fishing type activities in here. Ferries, the coastal ferries stopped at Samcheonpo too. And back then they actually had a hydrofoil as well. You could catch a hydrofoil. Like going back and forth along the coast by hydrofoil was a hell of a lot quicker than riding the old ferries. So this is the town. And then in the right photo, over here on the right side, is a mountain. It's actually looks like an old volcano. It was called Waryangdo or something like that, a dragon mountain. And inside of that mountain, there were farms and agriculture activities as well. And that mountain was directly behind our school. And in addition to fishing and the coastal traffic, the whole area was very rural and agrarian. And we were sort of lucky. I think most of us will say we're lucky to see these areas before, industrialization really took over South Korea. So this is what it looked like sometime during 1973. Very rural and agrarian. Once you got out of the main town, it was all farmland. And these are just scenes that I must have been walking around one day during harvest time, and they're planting time, and they were planting rice, but all done by hand, standing in the mud all day. And a lot of students were working in the farmland too, helping their parents or relatives during the planting and also during harvest. And these are some more country scenes. Doing wash down by the stream. This is up somewhere in the hills outside of the town. They were doing their laundry. And on the picture on the right, that was their impromptu lunch during during planting season. And the reason why I love this picture is because of the pot of kimchi on the bottom right-hand corner. And that kimchi looks so good, I tell you. They must have made it up that morning, so it was a beautiful scene. And this is the Korean tractor in 1973, all done by ox, plowing, hauling, all of that. I think one day I was riding in the train to Busan, I think, and I was taking pictures out the window, and I was shocked to see a farmer with the ox. And instead of the ox, it was his wife was pulling the plow down the fields.
I have
And
seen that also. My husband took a picture of one. I
Yeah.
was about to say that when you said it.
Yeah,
Yeah, I've
it was,
seen.
it was very shocking, even for 73, to see something like that. And this is the school that I was assigned to, Samcheonpo Namjunapkyo, in 1973. And this is really a country school and was very simple inside. It was colder than hell in the winter and hotter than hell in the summer.
Yep.
And those poor kids had to sit at those desks for hours on end. So every time there was a recess, they just ran outside and started screaming up and down the corridors. I can't say as I blame them. It must have been very difficult to sit there all day long, especially in the heat or the cold. And these are some of the students that were at the school. The kids on the left are kids that I encountered. I think they were Ilhang Young or some Young, probably Ilhang Young middle school students at that time when this picture was taken. And I don't know how they did it, but during the course of a year at the school, they could all speak nearly perfect English. I kid you not. And it was stunning to me that they all were smart enough to pick that up. And so we used to hang out every now and then, and they get English with me, and we go do stuff, play ping pong, take hikes, things like that. And the kid on the upper right hand corner, he was probably the smartest of all those kids, and he ended up going to Seoul National from our small town. He ended up matriculating to Seoul National, which is unbelievable. And then the kids on the right, I just took the picture of them when I was walking around in the country one day, and they came running up to me to talk to me. And this last picture is a bonus picture. So this lady that's participating in this archery contest, I actually lived with her for about, I don't know, half a year, I think. One of the issues I went through when I was in my town was I had a really hard time trying to find housing. And so I spent 6 months living in her home. I'm not exactly sure what her background is, but she would sing like Sijo poems and things like that. So she had some kind of background where she was familiar with all that stuff. And then one day she said, if I was free to come with her and her friend to some kind of event. And I didn't know what she was talking about, but when we got there, it was this big archery contest not too far out of town. And she was the only woman participating in that contest. The rest of the participants were all men. But it was a big deal. There's like hundreds of people there at this archery field. They were shooting arrows over a narrow like valley to the targets on the hill on the opposite side. It was cool. So, with the caveat that this is only my experience and my truth. I don't think I was the only Korean American from Hawaii who served in the Peace Corps in Korea. I know for sure there were at least two others. One I think was Greg Pai, and the other one was Michael Park. Both of them were from Hawaii. I think Greg he might have been a K1 or two. I don't know. He was early on in the program. And then Michael Park came after me. So, and I've never really spoken to them about, what they went through when they went to Korea. But I can tell you from my experience, I just had a really hard time. The first year I was sent to this school, well, I'm going to back up. So I finished training, and I don't know how they handle it in K1 days, but I remember going to some kind of like exit interview with somebody from the Peace Corps office. And they were asking me questions like where I wanted to go. Where would I want to go if I had a choice? So I said I wanted to go someplace where it was near the ocean. And all I can remember is somebody scoffing at me about why would you want to do that? And so I had to explain to them, what my preferences were. And he says that person that was doing this interview said some other very mean things to me. And I was wondering, where the hell is this coming from? I completed training. I didn't do anything untoward to anybody. And in any event, next thing I know, I met this man who was going to be my co-teacher from Samcheonpo Chungakgyo. And so we left Seoul eventually. He was a very pleasant person. He could speak pretty good English. And all I can remember is a very long trip. It took a long time to get to Samcheonpo. And there is no direct access to that place unless you went by ferry or bus. And by the time I got there and realized, what the situation was, he left. He literally left the school and returned to Seoul. And that was like a month after I had moved down there. And I was living with him and his wife and his family in their house. And he left. After that, it was very difficult, trying to communicate with the school. And I think they had trepidations about talking to me and or how to relate to me and what I was doing there. And the first year I was there was very difficult. I was very alone. I felt lonely, very lonely. And the only thing I did was go to school and teach, and then I would go home and I do whatever else I could do during the week. And I had a lot of friends, thankfully, from K25 who were in various coastal towns like Masan, not Masan, but Chungmu and Busan. So sometimes I would go visit them and hang out. But the rest of the first year that I was there was very, very lonely, and I felt very isolated. One time I actually did go to the Peace Corps office in Seoul. There was an incident in school, and I told them I'm not going back there unless this thing stops. And all I remember is they said, here's some per diem, and I had to go see the doctor. He gave me some medication, and they said, well, now you got to go back. I said, yeah, but did you talk to the school? I told you I'm not going back unless this stops. And they said, oh, yeah, everything's okay. So that was it. That was the only response to what I had talked to them about. So I went back.
What's the problem, Bruce, at the school? What kind of problem was it?
Well, this is a rural country school. One day I walked into Kyomushil, and some guy had this kid on his knees, and he was beating him with a stick.
Yeah.
And
I knew you were gonna say that.
so I told him, you got to stop this. I'm not gonna. And this is way after my co-teacher had left. I told him that's it. I'm not coming back here unless this stops. And the guy stopped beating him, thankfully. But
No, he didn't stop beating him. He just didn't beat it so you would see it.
Exactly.
yeah, while I was there,
Yeah.
while I
Not
was
an
there,
accumulation, yeah.
Because
yeah,
we, others of us have had that situation where we interrupted a beating and then it appeared they ended, but they didn't. They just moved elsewhere.
Yeah.
yeah. So that just triggered me going to Seoul and telling him what was happening in my school, and I need some help. And that was the help I got to spend a couple of days per diem and take this medicine. So the bright side is that I actually learned a lot about myself and how to adapt to different situations, difficult situations. And I finished out that first year, and the next year they sent another volunteer down there to the girls' middle school. And predictably, everything sort of like changed when that other volunteer came. I started getting invitations to go out and meet with the other English teachers in my school and the girls' school, which had never happened before. I eventually got my living situation squared away too after that person came, and I don't know whether his arrival had something to do with that, but I think things were improved a lot the second year I was there, and I was able to do other things because I think the school thought that they owned me, and when that other guy came, he started to do more outreach into the country schools to try to meet other English teachers. So that we would be able to, help them and work with them. So that changed a lot too.
The second
But-
person was a guy?
Yeah,
Okay.
a guy.
So now
The last-
they knew that American Peace Corps volunteers came in two different looks.
You're right. I'm not casting any aspersion as to why I was, I was treated that way the first year I was there, but my suspicion is that it had something to do with, first of all, they weren't prepared for that. When the guy left the school, the co-teacher left the school, they weren't totally not prepared for that, and they did not know how to adjust, nor were they interested in trying to make sure that they got the most and best use out of me. It was just like I was just showing up at school every day. That was it for the rest of that year.
They didn't know
Bruce,
what to do with.
go ahead.
Yes.
Bruce, I was going to ask if I've heard these days that Korean Americans, even if they speak Korean but not perfectly, often are criticized and told Chinese, they keep their language when they go overseas. Why did you Koreans did you get any of those kinds of expectations
Yeah,
or
seriously, all the time. Why can't you speak Korean? Are you Korean? Because you can't speak Korean. And I said, no, I'm not real. I am Korean, but ethnically, but I never studied Korean before I got to Korea. And people would
So
stop me.
did you end up communicating with your school in a combination of Korean and English, or did
Yeah, I like my broken Korean and English. And like I got
uh,
assigned another English teacher who I worked with for the rest of that year. And
your
like
mind?
sometimes, yeah, I was sort of able to make my thoughts known through that individual, but it was just a very difficult year for me, very difficult.
Wow.
And thankfully I had some good friends from our training group, and we could get together every now and then, so it made it much better. But yeah, it was just a combination thing, and I think there is some kind of like feelings about Koreans from other countries coming back to Korea. One time I was coming back in the airport, and the guy was opening my suitcase. I think I had gone home for Christmas the first year, and he opened my suitcase and he told me, he started talking to me in Korean, and I kept trying to respond as best I could, so much that I understood what he was asking me. But he really went after me about how come you're Korean and you can't speak Korean. And yeah, so that was a very uncomfortable part of what I had to go through. But again, that's only me. I can't speak for everybody's experience, and I don't know what, say, those other two volunteers from Hawaii went through. I don't know. All I know is that I don't think the Peace Corps supported me all that much, and I don't know why they thought that was such a hot idea to send me all the way down there by myself.
How far away was the closest other volunteer?
There was a volunteer from our group in Chinju, but I rarely saw him. He was like in Seoul all the
Were there
time.
volunteers from other groups?
Not in my area. I
Oh.
literally had to take the ferry to like Chungmu.
So
who I
this
had a
is
close friend,
on the
or
south
Busan.
coast?
Yeah.
How far, and because I lived in Busan for 1 year and Ulsan for
Yeah.
another year. How far? So obviously it's west of Busan, right?
Yeah.
How far in miles, do you know?
I don't know in miles, but it's probably halfway to Mokpo or something like that from Busan.
Okay.
And again, to get around in that area wasn't easy back then because there weren't that much highways built out as it is today. And
We remember.
yeah, remember?
Country
Those
buses.
long bus rides. And
Country
even
buses.
in, I think 2013 or something, I went back there with my kids and a friend of mine who was a K-25 in Gangneung. And he told me, he says, hell, he says, even today, it takes a long time to get here. He says, I can't believe how long it took. I said, yeah, even today, with these Kosokdoros and everything all over the place, it still takes a long time.
Rosebud, Samchenpo isn't that far from Kojido.
Yeah, it's not far from
Sort of
Kojido.
gives you an idea of where it was located.
Okay, but I
Mhm.
always thought Kojido was way the hell and gone because
No.
because it was west of Busan and we got on this boat and went for a long, long time. And then John Kroll went, was it Mokpo John was from? Is Mokpo in Gyeongnam-do?
No,
Chollado.
Chollado.
Cholanamdo.
Oh, because this other guy, I'm pretty sure he was in Gyeongnam-do. Maybe, anyway, this other volunteer from our group, he was from somewhere like Mokpo or someplace to the west of Busan. And when he went back on the revisit, he went to his town and he told me later, I'm sure he said there was a bridge to Kojido. And I said, that's not possible because it's, way out there in the ocean. Well, the reason it took so long on the boat was because it was so far west of Busan,
Mhm.
There is
I
a
got
bridge.
relatives in Kojedo, and there's definitely a bridge.
Yeah.
Yeah, that
Yeah.
goes across.
Well,
That's
we're
where they
blessed in
build
Howard
the
Day, right,
Daewoo
Ned?
and Hyundai shipyards.
Oh, it's great. I know it's great big. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh.
Nowadays, I went there a year ago to visit. When I was younger, you'd go, there was all Koreans. You go back there now, the only Koreans there are retired. It's all Nigerians, Kenyans, working in the
Interesting.
shipyards, full
Wow.
of mostly Africans and Middle Easterners.
Mhm.
Wow.
Wow.
Now, when I was in Peace Corps, there was a Korean American named Gary Ko. He had been, orphan, sent here, grew up in an
Mhm.
American family, spoke no Korean. He
Mhm.
went to Korea and he had tremendous problems that most of us never had because
Mhm.
they couldn't. I speak a few words and they go,
Mhm.
and they just couldn't understand why
Mhm.
he couldn't speak Korean. But you know what did happen? This is unique. I wonder if you had this problem. When he
Mhm.
went to his site, he was there about 3 weeks. Military police came and arrested him, threw him
Oh
into
my
boot
God.
camp.
Oh man.
He was born in Korea, hadn't done his military service. Took
Mhm.
the embassy and
Mhm.
Peace Corps like almost a month to get him out and back
Oh
to
my
his site.
God.
That's unreal. I
Yeah.
never heard that story.
Yeah,
That's
he was in
unreal.
boot camp speaking no Korean.
I hope he
Wow.
was one of the ones who had actually become a US citizen.
Oh, he was a citizen.
Because
That's how the
I think you
embassy
were
could
talking
get
about
him
the
out.
last time.
But
There were
the
some,
Korean said, "You're born here. You didn't do your military service."
Mhm.
I think that was a misunderstanding. If he was a
Absolutely.
naturalized American, he didn't have to serve. So
Probably
Bruce,
some
you were
gung-ho
One would
military
think.
police back in the 70s. You know how it
right.
was.
Yeah,
Mhm.
I do. Bruce,
Yeah.
could
Oh,
I
I
could I
remember.
ask you, unlike the person that was just referred to who was adopted to the
Mhm.
States, you were somewhat, let me ask it as a question. How
Mhm.
familiar were you with Korean culture before you went?
None.
Oh,
The
really?
only thing that our family did together, because my grandmother was alive at that time, was we would celebrate the holidays, especially at New Year's, with the family coming together and preparing all these Korean foods. So the Korean food part of it wasn't, different to me, or, as different it may have been to my other group mates. But the cultural part, yeah, I just never at that. And I'll talk about that a little later when
Yeah,
I get
right,
to the
right.
part about
Yeah,
my
I guess
family.
you could. Right.
So the only other thing that I know is back. I went back to the revisit to this school, and again, it took us a long time to get there. It was like an 8-hour bus ride or whatever. But
Even now.
even now,
Wow.
and
8 hours
this
from Seoul or what?
yeah, from Seoul,
Oh, okay.
stopping in Chinju and then coming down. So it took us about 8 hours or something. So we get to the school, and my guide went with me, and we drove up to the school, and we walked up to the school, and she asked to see the principal of the Chungakyo, which is now Namyo Chungakyo. And the guy says, "Oh, who are you? What are you doing here?" And she had to explain to him, that, "Oh, this is a former teacher at your school, and he came to pay a visit or revisit." And he had received some paper from the ministry or somebody saying that this was going to happen, but he had no idea what this was about.
Huh.
So again, that was a bummer for me.
Hmm.
And then some guy came up to me, because at that time I think they had native English speakers were being hired to work in secondary education. And so this guy comes up to me and he tells me, they bring this guy into the office, and he tells me, "Oh," he says, "Yeah, I've been working here as an English teacher, and then he started to say like all the benefits he gets by doing that." And I'm looking at him like, "Bro, I don't know what you're talking about." And he says, "Of course, I like to drink my wine, have my steak every now and then, and I go to Costco, or the Korean version of Costco, and get my wine and steak." And I'm looking at like, "Bro, I don't know I can't relate to that. I don't even know what you're talking about." That
So,
was like
Bruce,
unbelievable.
during your revisit, you didn't get a chance to meet any of your former students?
No,
Wow.
no,
I
no
don't
one
think I
literally
did.
did not know who I was. I had to show them pictures. I put pictures of the school on my iPad, and I showed them the pictures, and they recognized various teachers, but all those men are dead now. And but still, they had no idea what they mentioned. Some other woman's name. They might have sent a volunteer down there after me. I said, I'm not familiar with. I don't know her. So, and
When I
long and the
went,
short of it.
when
Go
I
ahead.
went, they didn't know who I was. Nobody knew about a letter coming down from Seoul and all
Mhm.
that sort of stuff. But they went to the old yearbooks and
Uh-huh.
they found my picture in the yearbooks. And after that,
Uh-huh.
everything went smooth. This
While
was
you
for the
were
revisit.
there?
Yeah, yeah. I was
Wow.
sitting
Yeah.
with the
Wow.
in the guest room, waiting for somebody to say, "Okay, we got to find out who this guy is," and they did it by yearbooks.
Yeah.
And then the president was golden to me. He was absolutely golden. I had a wonderful
Amazing.
day.
Amazing.
I
So
didn't go as a revisit, but when Ned went down to, because I live here, I'm not eligible for a revisit. But when I went with Ned and his wife down to Busan, and I went with their guide up to my high school, and unannounced completely. And the principal was exceedingly nice, gave me towels and presents. And, we talked about, there was a picture of the principal, Mr. No, when I was there. And, we talked about him, but I mean, he couldn't have been nicer. Yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
Good.
Yeah, that's interesting because when I went, this is 2012, on my revisit, and I took the train with just me
Your
and
handler.
my handler, and and there were like 11 of my students and a teacher waiting at the train station.
That's so
beautiful.
nice. That's so
All
nice.
It
students,
was
I mean,
awesome. And then, there were signs, blah, blah, blah. The school it was in a different location, but I think it's because of my connection with Ujong and that my Korean student who, yeah, I think it was a little bit different, but I'm surprised that Peace Corps didn't, that they didn't know you were coming.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
I
Oh.
came back to the States in 74, the end of the year 74, beginning of January 75. And I went to the Peace Corps office in Washington. I told them I want to talk about,
wow.
my service there. I admit that might have been kind of presumptuous of me, but
No,
I did
that's
actually
good.
talk to somebody, and I told them that they need to do a better job supporting the volunteers, especially the ones that are sent out into the countryside, because it's the change is too much. And many of my group mates, right, they were very successful at small country schools, very successful. But and then I just want to move on this thing. But the last thing I want to mention is that I don't know, a few years ago, 4 or 5 years ago, so I spoke to somebody who was in a position to know better, but that individual told me that he would have never sent me down there alone. He said he would have never done it. He said these obstacles are too much to overcome for an individual to overcome. It was counterproductive to send you down
Because
there.
of your Korean ethnicity?
Yeah, because of my ethnicity.
Okay.
It was here. He said that's a problem because you're going to have trouble. Like Frank said, people asking you like, how come you can't speak Korean, or what's
Sure.
wrong with you, or can't explain yourself, or like they would call me like Filipino. I'm a Filipino, and I tell them I'm not Filipino. I'm Korean, and they go, "No, you're not. You're not Korean because you can't speak Korean. You're Filipino."
It's obvious.
It's all kind of stupid stuff like that.
We were, as you know,
Could I interrupt
No.
Charlie
You
Goldberg,
already have.
who was and still is our handler. Charlie suggests that we let Bruce go ahead and give his presentation first, and then make comments and so forth.
Okay,
So to
Sounds
some
like a
degree,
plan.
let's try to do that.
Good idea.
okay. So I'm moving on now. So this is a story about my family, and this has something to do with my Korean Peace Corps
Can I ask
service.
a question about this picture?
Yeah.
Okay, the woman that you went over with, and she was the only woman, was she better than all the men?
Well, surprisingly, she's a petite lady, and you can see how big the other men are, and these bows are like really hard to pull. They're like from Mongolia or something, however the Korean bows came to be, and there was a long valley across in front of her, and on top of it, which were the targets. They were shooting at these wooden targets, and her arrow actually reached there. So she was a pretty good, archery person. So, and the men that, they didn't harass her or laugh at her or yell at her or anything like that. So she must have been pretty well known among them, and she was competitive. So that was a fun day.
Cool.
So when I went over there, Frank asked about how much I had been, made aware of Korean culture, etc. But aside from the food, none. And this is my grandmother's family, and they came in 1904 from Korea. So the first wave of the Korean diaspora, this family arrived in Hawaii to work on the sugarcane plantation, and they ended up on the island of Kauai to work on the sugar plantation. My grandmother's the oldest daughter in this family, and she's there on the left. So she was born in 1997. This picture was taken in 1897. Thank you. And this picture was taken in 1910. Okay, and she was already married.
Yeah.
In Hawaii. So this was her husband. Her husband is to her left. Her two brothers, older brothers, or younger and older brother, are to her far left. The young girl of the two young girls on the right-hand side, my right-hand side, is somebody's wife. I think one of her brother's wives.
Oh.
And this young girl here on the far right is my great aunt Priscilla. And then the young girl in the front is my great aunt Martha. And then that's my grandmother's father. So they came on the first wave of Koreans immigrating to the United States, and they came on some labor contract which obligated them to work in the sugar plantation for at least a year. So that's
They went as a family?
yeah, as a family, which was unusual.
Hmm.
And
Bruce,
But no
yeah.
great grandmother.
No,
Do you want to?
I think the father's wife had passed away. Her mother had
Bruce,
passed away.
are you
Yeah.
familiar with the book by Professor Marn Cha, Koreans in Central California, a study of settlement and transitional politics? I
No,
was
I'm not. I'm
involved
sorry.
in this. He's a
Uh-huh.
professor at Fresno State. I helped him with the research. He wrote a very good book on the migration. He starts in Korea in 1900. He traces, I'll bet you your parents were Christians, because 95% of all the Koreans who came to Hawaii in the first wave, second wave, were Christians, thanks to the Underwoods and the Moffats and a few other Christian missionaries. And they got recruited. It's a very good book. I'm sure you would like it. Anybody here interested in the very first Korean wave to Hawaii? Then there's a wave from there to Ellis Island. Not Ellis Island, Angel Island, the Ellis Island to San Francisco. And then they move into the California Central Valley. And and he traces all of this. He started out going to graveyards in Dinuba and Reedley, full of Koreans that died starting around 1920 or so.
Yeah,
And he
it's a
traced
very
all
like
of those names. Then he went to Angel Island and traced all their immigration records. Then he went to Hawaii and traced all their immigration records. And he lists almost all Koreans who immigrated during that period that are on record. It's a tremendous.
So this is how this came to my attention, because I've seen this photo before in another book by a local Hawaiian woman named Roberta Choi, and she took my dad's photograph and put it in her book. But I had never learned about the history of my family, which to most people it may seem odd, but my grandmother never talked about that to me, nor did my father. He would just make every now and then make a comment about something, but like his father, I've never met. I never met my grandfather, and my grandmother raised all of her kids by herself.
Oh.
And it's a remarkable story, as you just alluded to, about how these people survived, given what circumstances led them to leave Korea at that time. And so these are pictures of my dad and his mother while my dad was serving in the U.S. Army Air Force overseas in Europe. So my dad must have met her during either coming back from Europe or before he left for Europe. And he ended up becoming a navigator bombardier on an attack bomber. And he flew about, according to one of the citations I have, he flew 60 combat missions during World War II. That was phenomenal. And survived. The fact that he survived.
From England or where?
No, he started in North Africa, and then they went into the Italian campaign where they're pushing the Nazis out of Italy.
Yeah.
So he spent most of his time in Italy during that campaign, but he ended up flying 60 combat missions, which that's a lot of flying. So, and this is I've talked to Diane about this, and I don't know if I mentioned it to Frank, but this article was given to me by one of my dad's cousin's daughters. So she's my second or third cousin, or to my family. And somehow it goes to my sisters, but not to me. But so anyway, she sent me a copy of this article. So this article is in the possession now of the Korean American Historical Society here in in Seattle. I haven't actually seen it. The guy says probably I could go see it one day, but I don't think they're open all the time, so it's kind of difficult making getting scheduled to see it. But this lady at Charleston Southern University wrote this article in 2018 because by fortuitous chance, somebody connected with this historical society came across this photo album that my great aunt Priscilla had kept all these years. And after she passed away, somehow it ended up in a thrift store in Seattle.
Wow.
I still don't know how that might have happened,
Yeah.
other than one of her sons was an engineer at Boeing. Maybe after he passed away, his belongings were given to this thrift shop. So somebody looking through it said, "Oh, this is like very interesting." And so somehow this professor at Charleston Southern, the museum must have made contact with her through this historical society, and she wrote this article about the historical facts in that book, in this photography album. But the article itself is all full of citations from many of the books that you've mentioned already, and well-known authors who have tried to chronicle the early modern American history of Korean immigrants in America. So this was the first time I ever read in black and white, or actually ever heard, the history of my family's journey to America. I had never heard that story ever, either before I was in the Peace Corps, during the time I was in Peace Corps. I asked my grandmother once in the Christmas when I came back after my first year, I went home for Christmas, where was her hometown? And I asked it in English and I asked it in Korean, and she wouldn't tell me.
Wow.
She wouldn't say.
Wow.
So this was a revelation to me. And again, it made me feel very lucky that I was able to experience Korea at the time that we did, because it's more closely tied to the agrarian society that they were living in when they immigrated out of Korea in 1904. So they arrived in Honolulu in 1904 on one of the first ships out of Korea. And I've seen actually the diaspora at that time. You mentioned New York City. I saw a documentary. I'm not sure if it's on PBS or Netflix. Some of them ended up in Mexico, working in an agricultural field in Mexico, and some of them ended up in Cuba. And during the same period of time, and one of their Cuban children, the children of these Korean immigrants, who was pure Korean, ended up in some kind of high, intelligence position in Fidel Castro's government, which was fascinating. How that ever happened. But yeah, there's a lot of interesting stories in this article. It's heavily footnoted. She did a lot of research on some of the interesting facts in it. And it's very
I think
enlightening.
Diane will send this along with the PowerPoints to all of us.
Great. It's a very interesting article about this. The other participant mentioned the book that was written about Koreans in America. It's very interesting. And it's hard to believe that they overcame all these hardships. Really hard to believe. But the thing that really makes me bittersweet is that, even when I was growing up and after I came back from Korea, no one ever talked about our family's history to me directly. So all of this information that I got was mostly from this article in 2024. So
I don't think my grandparents were immigrants from Ireland, and on the other side, great grandparents from Ireland. And I think everything, the specifics I know is from my brother and other people in my generation researching it. Nobody. I
Okay,
guess
go ahead, Bruce, with your presentation.
Okay, so that's it. That's all I have to say.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right. Wow, that was great. That was really
Well,
interesting.
fascinating.
It seems to be a common thread if you watch any of the Find My Roots thing, Find Your Roots on TV. That people 2 generations back don't know anything
Uh-huh,
Mhm.
generally about
Mhm.
any of that.
yes.
But
cover it.
it's
That's all.
interesting that even when you asked your grandmother the simple question of where was her hometown, she would not tell you. I
Mhm.
mean, sometimes, the generation doesn't want to talk about it because they think you're not interested or they want to be part of the new country, not the old.
I think that's
Mhm.
true.
But why do you think she wouldn't even answer that one question? Was it because they were from the north?
No, no, they're from the south, from Gyeongsangnam-do. So, from according to this article, so the circumstances, so I don't know. My grandmother was a saint, in my humble opinion, and again, she overcame a long odds to raise her family and um, succeed in a certain measure, and her sisters as well. She put them through the University of Hawaii.
Wow,
My grandmother put her 2 younger sisters to the University of Hawaii, both of which
wow.
went on to get graduate degrees on the mainland. I think from the University of Michigan, and that's where my Aunt Priscilla met her husband, who is I think a research chemist. It talks about this in this article, her who she married, etc. And then my youngest Aunt Martha, the little girl in this picture, married a Chinese American chemist, or no, a doctor who was doing research work at the University of Michigan, and he stayed there for a long time, living in Ann Arbor. But again, it's not unique. I think many Korean Americans succeeded where nobody would probably give them any chance, particularly at that period of time. But the fact that they succeeded in the way that they succeeded, and then this whole album that they discovered in this thrift store documents a lot of the independence movement and what was going on in Hawaii and across the country through these various Korean American groups who were supporting the independence movement in Korea. And one of the funny,
Japanese, mean?
yeah, and one of the funny stories is that some person was going around telling people in Hawaii that they shouldn't marry outside the Korean race. And it's a shame to marry outside the Korean race. So my Aunt Priscilla, who's, kept this album, married this, my Aunt Martha married this Chinese American doctor. And they never mentioned the fact, they mentioned my Aunt Martha in these various articles promoting what she was doing on the mainland in her academic career and in the independence movement, but they never mentioned her husband because he was a Chinese American.
I
It's
love
kind of
it.
funny. Yeah. So they
You put
they
the-
just didn't.
Can you put the slide up that shows the book again,
Yeah.
please?
So the reluctance to talk about. I mean, even my dad, right? He's a college graduate, went to law school, came back. He lived on the mainland for a while, especially during the war years. But he never talked about this either, except for vague references to, "Oh, that's your grandfather," or something like that. But not beyond that, nothing at all about the circumstances of the family or what happened to them all. Even the relatives, I'm not really familiar with most of them because we never met them. But this is the article from the Korean American Historical Society, who
Go
they
ahead,
were very
Charlie.
excited. They were very excited that I was going to share this with the group.
Yeah.
Actually, in 2003, it was the 100th anniversary of Korean immigration to the United States. And the
Mhm.
University of Hawaii sponsored a lot of different programs just sort of focused on that. And Roberta Chang, the woman you mentioned before, that's when her book came out.
Yep.
Young Ho Che did a series of articles called From the Land of the Hibiscus, which
Mhm.
focused on different aspects of the Korean American experience. And so I kind of understand the literature. So I'm glad you introduced this one by Park because I had not seen
Mhm.
this. And right now there is a Korean Immigration Institute run by a woman by the name of Ducky Lee Motobayashi.
Mhm.
And if you go to the Center for Korean Studies webpage, you can find her. And she's also they've done a lot of the records of when people came on the different boats. And I'm sure you
Mhm.
can find your grandparents.
Yeah, they have one of those attached to this article. She attached one of those lists where the Choi
Oh, okay.
family is recorded,
Yeah.
arriving in 1904.
So next time you come to the islands, I can show you a few things.
I'd love that. I bet you could, man. What's the
In
deal?
that book I mentioned, one thing it references, Sigmund Rhee used to come to this town, Reedley and Danuba, regularly. The first millionaire, Korean millionaire, lived in that area. And he would come collect money. And he would give lectures to them. Don't marry outside your race. Don't marry
Yeah.
outside Korean. And
Yeah.
then one day he shows up with his new wife, Francesca, the
Francesca.
Austrian.
From
Yeah.
Vienna.
And it caused, according to this book here in his research, it caused almost all the money flowing to him to shut off.
To dry up.
Yeah.
Should've
That's in this
known.
article too. That's in the article too, because they said,
Is it?
why
Yeah.
did they ostracize my Aunt Martha for marrying a Chinese American doctor? But then they did the opposite to my Aunt Priscilla, who married a Korean chemist or chemical engineer. Yeah, this is funny. And yeah, they mention also that in Hawaii, when Sigmund Rhee married that Austrian woman, all the contributions dried up because he had been so hard on promoting this thing about marrying only in your race.
That's interesting. In Hawaii too. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I was curious about the sequence of events. You mentioned that, I guess it's on your mother's side. They came with a 1 year, an agreement that they would work in the fields for 1 year.
Mhm.
I wonder if you were able to get any information from this article or elsewhere about what
Mhm.
happened after that. How do they establish themselves in?
So
in
the art,
Hawaii?
yeah, that's a good question. The article actually, again, this is like brand new news to me. I had met actually some of these people when I was a child, but I didn't know any of their backgrounds or what they were doing. So in this article, it says that when they went through their contract and got out, and this article seems to say that the Koreans were really good about getting off the plantation. I mean, they had bigger dreams than just working in the fields, and plus it was very hard. And as Ned knows, some of these books document very tragic stories of the Korean immigrants working on the plantation, like women jumping into wells, drowning themselves with their kids. It's very tragic because they couldn't take it. It was so hard. So my grandmother's brothers all went off and founded their own businesses and became, according to this, very successful in their own right, doing various things. Like I know my one of the uncles or brothers they talk about in here started a tailor business and during World War II made a fortune. And of course they were pretty good businessmen, I guess. And my grandmother was very successful too in her own way. But there's a lot of hardship associated with that success.
So
Now,
you're saying
many of the
after the year
Koreans
was
from
up-
Hawaii, when they finished their servitude, went to California. That's what this book I mentioned traces.
Yeah,
And many of them came here to California because there was more opportunity to start their own
absolutely.
businesses. And yeah.
So that the article seems to conclude that a lot of them were very, very successful because they had bigger picture in mind. There's a bigger goal in mind. And they knew after the Japanese took over Korea, they couldn't go back. They could not go back. So I think that chapter of their life, they just closed the book on that and just looked only to the future. And that may have been some of the, reasons why they didn't want to share this with their children
But
or
you said they came
grandchildren.
in, 2000, I mean, when in
1904. 1904.
04. Oh,
The first group came in 1903.
Right.
And basically, it ended up around 1905 because the Japanese
Cut it off.
Yeah.
So I read that in this article too, but that's something I had seen before in another one of the books that I read, that the Japanese didn't want the Korean immigrants competing with the Japanese immigrants, so they lobbied the government to stop immigration. And of course, at that time, they're in the process of taking over Korea, so they stopped immigration from.
Right, 1905, it became a protectorate of Japan.
Mhm, mhm.
Got out just in time.
I have found a PDF of this article, the
Great.
early Korean immigrants, so I can send
Uh-huh.
a link to everybody.
Yeah,
Great.
thanks. Thanks.
Yeah.
You know, one of the interesting things in Hawaii is among the various ethnic groups, Koreans had one of the highest out marriages, in part because there weren't a lot of women, and
Yes.
so men, if they can't find somebody who's Korean, they found a lot of other people. Many married Hawaiian women.
Right. Right.
Some of my son's best friends at Kamehameha schools were actually of Korean ancestry.
Right. It was remarkable.
Yeah, so it's really quite a record, and one
They-
reason I think they were so successful, also, as you're pointing out, is they were kind of entrepreneurial in spirit, and also I think the fact that a lot of them became Christians made them more acceptable to the racist haoles that then dominated the islands, and I think that gave them added credibility. And Sigmund Rhee, of course, is a good example of that. And the fact that they built a lot of churches just made them, in the eyes of these racist Protestants, more acceptable.
Tell the truth. Tell the truth, Ned.
Well, I'm Protestant, so I understand why they're racist.
No, but that's absolutely true. I mean, even my dad graduated so my grandmother made sure my father went to college, so he went to the University of Hawaii. He graduated from the University of Hawaii, and the best job he could find was as a longshoreman.
Wow.
A college graduate.
Wow.
He graduated from the University of Iowa Law School after the war, returned to Honolulu, and he couldn't find a job.
Oh, God.
He graduated from a Big Ten law school, and he couldn't find a job in Honolulu. Somebody told me that once, that he says, he tells all his young associates that they should be grateful for people like my father, because if it wasn't for those trailblazers, they wouldn't be practicing law in Honolulu.
Look at all the Black lawyers who were Pullman car porters.
Yeah. They couldn't. The funny thing too is, like, it mentions this in the article, and my dad's first cousin, Herbert,
Herbert Choi?
He became the first Asian American attorney general anywhere in the country,
Wow.
and in Hawaii, and he became the first Asian American appellate court, the circuit court, when the Circuit Court of Appeals, Federal Circuit Court of Appeals, judge in history.
Wow.
So that's how, in one generation, now we're talking, their children succeeded.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Just for people are probably aware, we have our first Korean American senator now, U.S. Senator.
Andy Kim.
Yeah, wonderful.
Kim.
New Jersey.
It's wonderful.
From New Jersey.
New Jersey.
From Jersey.
From
No,
Jersey.
he's from New Jersey.
Oh,
New
New
Jersey.
Jersey.
We do not recognize Jersey. It's off the coast of England. Actually, it's
That's
like,
in England.
but
you
me
guys
and
should
Bobby
invite-
are expats, I guess, right?
Yes. Well, I'm very expat, but I vote in New Jersey.
I vote in Oregon. I vote in Oregon.
Well,
Bruce,
you live in Oregon.
you named Michael Park and somebody Pye as
Greg
Greg.
Pye. P-A-I, Pye.
He overlapped with us, as I recall.
Yeah,
And
he was early on.
I remember, I think I had some conversations with him, but I do remember that he had a hard time of it because of the expectations that people had of him were not fulfilled because of the way he looked. And it was a rough go.
Greg is actually an interesting guy because his father was the Korean ambassador to Japan.
Wow,
time.
interesting.
Yeah, and so he had to play things carefully. He's still very active in the islands. He's a musician, he performs, and kind of enjoys, I guess, his retirement.
Hey,
And
Bruce.
he's a nice guy.
The reason
I've met
I
him.
asked is because on the backside, I'm looking at Friends of Korea's database.
Mhm,
So I can see that Michael Park was a K-29.
mhm.
But there is no Greg Pye in the
Mhm.
Friends of Korea database at all.
Mhm.
Not even listed as an unknown. So
Yeah.
Ned,
Mhm.
if you can give me any contact, I'd
Sure.
be pleased to have it.
Sure. I'll talk to him. Tell him to
Mhm.
fess up.
Yeah, come on. Come on.
Do you know? So he would have been, Charlie, you think maybe K3, 4, 5, something?
Something in that range, yeah, as I recall.
Mhm.
If it wasn't him, I know that there was a Korean American volunteer who came over during the time that overlapped with us.
Yeah,
And like I say, was having a hard time.
he was a
Mhm.
K5, the guy you're
Okay,
talking
well, that's
about.
K5.
right. then.
And he was
That's
Cookie
right.
Kim. Cookie Kim. Sanu. Cookie Sanu.
Cookie Sanu.
Cookie Sanu, that's who
Yeah, yeah,
that's
yeah.
right. Cookie
Sorry,
Sanu.
my mythical wife in Korea is Cookie Kim. And that was
Cookie Sanu,
What are you
yes.
Wasn't Cookie
That's
Sanu
what,
part of our group?
What are
Pardon?
you talking about?
Wasn't Cookie Sanu part of our group?
No,
No, he's
No.
K5. K5.
K5.
He's a K5. Why
Yeah.
do we know him? We overlap.
He overlapped, yeah.
Hey, Bruce, I don't
Yes.
know, but so you did not speak Korean at all in your home growing up?
No.
Did your mom, did she growing up? I mean,
No.
Again, I
mother is
don't
like-
think that's unusual from people.
no,
Yeah.
I know a lot of kids when I was that rebelled. It was very typical to rebel, but they just really wanted you to be an American, speak English.
Yes.
Yeah.
China,
that-
it is true that Chinese Americans always set a very great value on the children learning the language. But I don't think I've ever read of any other group that did it as much.
Well, the Japanese had language schools, the
So did the
Koreans had
Chinese.
language schools, so there
And-
was an attempt. But I think with the Korean case, there were so few of them. And so it's that much harder to build a strong community in which they're pushing studying.
Not
in-
supportable. Not
Yeah.
supportable.
Yeah, I'm
And
thinking
if we're-
of groups from Europe that also did the same thing, did not.
Mhm.
Right.
I'm sorry.
But the Japanese and the Chinese populations were more concentrated
Yeah.
on the West
Mhm.
Coast, for example, and the Japanese were more dispersed. And I think that had an effect on that.
So my dad, when he came back, this is like late 50s, early 60s, he tried to revive this organization called the Korean National Association, which I think is the Kookmin Way or something.
Yeah, Kuminghue,
in Korean,
yeah.
right? He tried to revive it, and he spent a number of years trying, but after a while he gave up because it was mostly the elderly first generation Koreans, and it was very hard to get new blood into the organization to sustain it. They can't sustain it. They couldn't sustain it. So he gave up after a while. But he spent a number of years trying.
In Hawaii, they had another organization called the Dongjihue, which
Mhm.
was sort of the Comrade Society. And that was sponsored by Sigmund Rhee. And
Uh-huh.
so that actually is still alive today. Not
Mhm.
terribly active, but the Kuminghue and the Dongjihue sort of were
Rivals.
at odds with each other.
Yeah, at best rivals. I don't think there was too much. They didn't like each other too much, but
When you were talking earlier, Bruce, it surprised me. As you know, we're the ones, and we were the first people there, and we didn't know what the hell we were doing, and there was hardly any structure. There were 2 staff people in Seoul, and eventually things got a little better. But you were there 10 years after us, and I'm just amazed that they didn't have better ways of paying attention to you, all of you, and taking care of you.
Mhm.
It's just surprising.
Mhm.
I'm surprised they gave you medicine for what happened.
Are we talking like
Yeah.
anti-anxiety medicine or something?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
I forgot what it started with an L. I don't know what it was.
Lipopor.
Yeah.
Ed Klein was a staff member in the early 70s. Maybe he can shed some light on this lack of attention.
Who was?
Even
you
when
know,
I was there, they
Diane-
didn't pay
Diane-
much attention.
Yeah,
I was there
Diane,
77, 78. They didn't pay much attention to anybody at their sites. They didn't help
Is that
people
right?
much if you had trouble.
Wow.
Huh. That's,
But we
Yeah,
had a
Di-
really good doctor. I think we had a new doctor. We had Dr. Chu. And so at
Oh.
least we didn't get deep get medicine for
Antidepressants.
treatment like the antidepressants because we were having trouble at school. But lots of people in my group had big trouble with kids getting hit in school. That was
Yeah.
across the board. That was the
Yeah,
biggest
well-
problem that people had with their sites.
yeah.
Yeah,
who
so did we all. I saw a bunch of kids get
Yeah.
beat with a baseball bat in the
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Is that a
Straps,
girls' school or a
belts.
boys' school, Bobby?
Yeah.
I was in a boys' school.
Because I
So
didn't see
I
it.
can identify with a lot of what he said about his first year.
Mhm. So Diane, called to my attention, and I absolutely, subscribe to this, that the women in our group had a really difficult time. So I think some
Oh,
of them
dear
left.
me, you think so?
Some of them left. So my difficulties weren't, like that. It was other kinds of difficulties, but they definitely had a hard time.
Yeah.
And and I don't know what kind of support they got. They should have got support, but I don't know if they did or not.
I
Well,
do-
you were just a different kind of other.
Yeah.
When we've talked about the Confucianism of the relationships, that I described that as a foreigner, we didn't count. Were we older? Were we younger? Were we family? Were we the same village? Were we richer, poorer? That until somebody figured out we were a teacher, we had no status. We had about the same status as a rock, and so we were fair game for, the touching and the teasing and the jibing and the whatever. And you were another one,
Mhm. Mhm.
You're an honorary woman, Bruce.
Wow.
I should say wow.
I don't know that I totally.
I should
agree
get
with-
an award.
You should. Well, when we all get our awards from the Peace Corps, we'll make sure they give you one. How's that?
Oh, thanks. Thanks.
Uh,
I
Diane,
won't
I
waste
don't
any
know that I
time
totally-
waiting for it.
I don't
do
know that Diane,
yeah.
I don't think that I agree completely with what you just said. I do certainly agree that for the women volunteers, it was a much more difficult problem because for obvious reasons. But for the men, not so much. I don't really feel that I was in that, kind of people. People sort of accepted me pretty easily. Obviously I was I was different. I couldn't speak the language very well, and there were problems. But I don't think that I was equivalent to a rock. On the other hand, I think people, if anything, were very, very bent over backwards to be very helpful, and I appreciated it a lot. So I think for a man, it was rather different than it was for a woman.
Well,
I would agree with that.
What I
too.
was saying about the no status was people on the street.
Right.
Anybody who
Yes.
knew us, then there was a relationship. And Koreans respond to relationships, then they know how to put you. But the people on buses or the people waiting at buses or
That's true.
in the market,
People didn't know
who
what to
had
do.
no
Kind of what
context.
I heard about Jim Wilson, that there was like a 4-block square where, because he was African American, that people that knew him loved him and he could sing and he was in school, but once he went out of that area, it was really hard for him. I remember hearing that.
Yeah.
I don't know.
And you know what's
So-
interesting, Bruce? I was thinking when you were talking earlier, I was in Busan, so and the other volunteers like Ned and Frank and a couple other, and Sharon and her husband were all in Busan, obviously.
Mhm.
And the guy who became my husband while we were there was it was a county seat, Yongsan, which is, I think, I don't know, northwest of Busan or something. But the guy I was going with was in a much smaller town than I was in. And he just, to hear his stories anyway, the town, especially the male teachers, just, good God, adopted him and took him drinking every night, and they got drunk it was just wonderful. And I'm sitting in Busan doing absolutely nothing. Nobody invited me to go drinking. So a couple of years later, I realized that, number one, people don't ask women to go drinking. And number two, I think that Ned and Frank and Larry, et cetera, they didn't have that either in the big city, because all of our teachers had a lot of work after school that the teachers in the small town didn't have. So I was comparing myself to David and coming out number 2 or number 100 or something. But if I'm looking at how much Ned and Frank were taken out drinking by their teachers, I would have realized they weren't either. So it's just, when you're talking, I'm thinking, well, and you were I think the town you're in was probably smaller than Yongsan. I don't know if you know where Yongsan is, but I gotta be, might one say the Koreans might have been racist, like, because you're a Korean. I mean, I really think that's got to be.
We're probably just confused, you know, like.
Bruce, did the teachers take you out drinking together?
Not the first year I was there. Not until the second volunteer came. That's the first time I was ever invited to go out drinking with the
And
teachers.
he was Caucasian, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and actually, I've never asked you guys, Ned and Frank, you didn't go out drinking with your teachers all the time, did you?
No, only to the picnic. In my case, we had a picnic where we went out, by the ocean somewhere.
Early in November?
I think so. And the students all brought alcohol and food for the teachers, and everyone got gloriously drunk. That was
hammered.
Really the time.
Yeah.
Well,
I had a couple of friends who actually, we would go out. I actually had a science teacher who was stolen from your school, Rosebud. And he didn't speak English, but he had time. And so we ended up doing a lot of going down to Songdo and playing Sutta or Huatu or whatever it is. And I had, and after my friends finished their nightly arbeit, we would sometimes meet and have a beer downtown Busan. So.
Oh, okay.
I
But
remember
David did this about 10 evenings a
one
week.
time that Larry went out, because he didn't go out drinking, but he went out once with this co-teacher, Mr. Kim, and they were late after the curfew. And I remember Ujung kept coming into my room. Are you okay? Are you okay? She didn't realize how happy I was to have that time by myself. But anyway, so they got home after midnight, and Emo goes out there beating on Mr. Kim's chest and so mad at him for keeping Larry out too late. And ever after that, it was always Napun Kim. He was Napun Kim. But and she never allowed him to go out with him again. He never went with him again. It was so funny.
I got taken out drinking all the time, but it was probably because they were trying to suck up to me as a CIA agent.
Oh, that's
That's
right.
true. That was it. That was it, Charlie. Charlie and Diane, you probably remember maybe, I don't know, 12 or so years ago, we had dinner in Portland, and Charlie, you and Julie were going down to wherever Alan Taylor lives to see him.
Yes, to Corvallis.
Yeah.
Corvallis, okay. Anyway, I think Julie said that evening, was she a 7? Is that what she was?
What's
Yes.
that? Yes, it was
Yes.
B7,
Okay.
yes.
So a couple years after us, I think she said that after X date, maybe while she was in country, they never put single women outside Seoul again. Does that sound possible?
I know that it's not right. That's not right, because when we went on our revisit, we met up with some women who actually were in some of the health projects, going out, and they were sent way out into the countryside,
Hmm.
and single women,
Okay.
to
Barley
really.
Wade didn't last very long in Jeju, I believe.
One
Right, well,
day.
she was in our, she was in
Overnight.
our group, but the question was
Yeah,
about
I
women
know.
after Julie's time, and
Right.
I know for a fact that there were at least a number of women who were at that revisit who had been sent out to very small towns by themselves.
Mhm.
When I was there, they didn't send anyone to Seoul. Seoul and Busan were
Huh.
excluded for Peace Corps volunteers by the late 70s,
How
Oh,
and
come?
that everybody went to the country.
Oh,
wow.
Yeah,
that's interesting.
yeah.
Huh.
Hey, Bruce,
Yeah.
I have kind of a silly question, but I'm just curious. You had that picture that you took of those two boys out in the countryside and how
Yeah.
they kind of encountered you.
Yeah.
I had encounters like that all the time too, but it'd be usually hello, okay, hello, hello, okay.
Okay.
Uh-huh.
Were they your students or something, or did they know you?
You know,
or-
I don't recall these as being my personal students, other than they probably were in the middle school, the boys' middle school at the same time. But
Way on the
it's
left.
just these random encounters, and I'm not saying that being a Peace Corps volunteer damaged my ego, or made me feel bad for the rest
Damage
of my life.
mine.
But the good thing about one of the positive things, very positive things, is I got to establish these connections with these young people, and of course they're just like young kids anywhere in the world. So these two kids, I was walking in the field that day taking pictures of the planting, and they're just by happenstance, and they just ran up to me, so Sensei Nim, and I go, well, let me take your picture, and these beautiful smiles came out. It was fantastic.
Well, I
And
was
I
a little
probably
bit. Is that you, the guitar? I'm sorry, I was a little bit late.
yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, that's when I was 12.
very
when I was 12.
American.
Bruce, you didn't talk at all about what your assignment was at the school where you were teaching. Did you teach a regular class, or how did that work out?
Yeah, so my group K-25, we were middle school English, and what my anticipation is that I would go to the school and I would help, train the teachers, but it evolved into me just showing up and teaching like 2 or 3 classes a day.
Were you
And
trained
throughout
to
the day.
train them?
Oh yeah, that's what I thought we were supposed to be
You were
doing.
trained to train the teachers.
All right.
Oh, okay.
So I thought that's what we were going to do. The purpose of us being sent out there was to spread the word, among all the teachers, and because we're a resource that is valuable to them, I think.
But
I
the
think- I
principal
thought.
had to accept that, right?
And that's part of the problem, because I
Yeah.
think he thought of me as his property because he was paying my salary, right? My monthly stipend. So I wasn't encouraged to do any of that, and I was reluctant to tell the vice principal or whoever was in the Kyomashil that, I think I should go meet these people at the girls' school and these other country schools, to help
Were
them,
you
because
supposed to go around to different schools?
the second year I was there, when the other volunteer arrived, it evolved into something like he and I going out and visiting all these schools, which is good for him. I mean, that was his initiative, and it became very fulfilling because we got to meet a lot of highly motivated country school teachers who needed help.
Yeah, I bet.
And there were a lot of smart kids out in the country schools,
Sure.
So that was like a more rewarding. I mean, much better. It was a tremendous improvement from the first year I was there, but it didn't make everything okay. But at least at that point in time, I didn't care anymore. If they didn't want me to go anywhere, I had to sit at my desk, or they were jealous because I went to somebody else and they were paying my salary and they didn't like that. I just ignored all that because I had limited use here, and what I had done already, was very effective in my eyes, because I had students who, at least as far as speaking English, they were doing tremendous. Some guy told me once, I was riding with him in a car in Seoul, and he was a high corporate official for some company. And he told me, Mr. Kim, he says, "Oh, that's a hard job you have." I said, "Really?" He goes, "Yeah, Koreans, they have their vocal cords. They cannot pronounce R and L." And I said, "Wait a minute. I'm Korean and I can pronounce R and L, and I have some kids,
I
13,
think it's
12,
lips.
13.
It's lips. It's not vocal cords.
Yeah, no, he said vocal cords. He said the Korean vocal
He was
cords. You
wrong.
cannot
It's
pronounce.
lips.
No, he's
Yeah,
totally
lips,
wrong, and he's an
tongue.
educated person.
Hey, Bruce, I have a question. Maybe, and again, I was a little bit late. Maybe you said this. Did you specifically want to go to Korea when you joined the Peace Corps?
I wanted to go to Africa, and they said no, Africa. They said Korea, and I said okay.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they said no, Africa.
Why?
Now the Peace Corps has another policy. They won't let anyone go to a country where they have a relative. I had a student from Cambodia who wanted to go to Peace Corps Cambodia so bad, but she had relatives, so she ended up going to Indonesia.
Wow.
Hmm.
I wonder what
Yeah.
caused that.
I don't know. Maybe people leave their sites. I don't know what it is. They must have had some problem somewhere, right?
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, they have this rule that they don't want people going to countries where they have relatives.
I can imagine people getting leaned on by
That too.
local country relatives.
Mhm.
I can imagine that.
Yeah, yeah. There must have been some issues enough to make them make that policy.
Mhm.
Bruce, when you're talking about
Mhm.
the Korean vocal cords, which I guess yours, all that air in Hawaii and the west coast of the United States changed yours, I suppose.
Yeah.
Anyway,
We
when I
evolved.
lived-
We
when I-
evolved from working on the plantation. We evolved.
that was it.
The
I
plantation.
lived in Boise when my children were very small, and we had some Basque neighbors, and some were from Idaho and some were from Spain. But there was this one guy, and he was born in the prairie outside Boise, and his name was Jacinto, which isn't even a Basque name, it's a Spanish name. But growing up in school, he was always called Gene because teachers could not pronounce Jacinto. And my younger child, my older child was about 2 at the time, and he called the guy Jacinto because that was his name. And this guy was so impressed that this child who couldn't even read could say the name right. And it just wasn't worth explaining. He hears it and then he says it. And the thing you're saying, the guy who said this to you about the vocal cords, he was educated. He was educated about engineering or something. He wasn't educated about linguistics. There's so much. People know one
But
thing.
this is like 1973 in Seoul by a high corporate official who must have graduated from some Seoul National or someplace. And he's telling me this, and I'm just like stunned, like what?
Anyway.
I love that picture of you and the guitar with the kids. You can just tell
one of my favorite.
You're not Korean. I mean, you're not from Korea, with the hair. It's just so cute.
Yeah.
That's
and all their great haircuts.
Yeah.
The other picture,
shirt, I don't know. It's just
the other picture, are the jackets like a school uniform, or they just happen to have the same jacket, or?
Yeah, they wear those jackets for undong, when they had went on and did sport exercise and stuff.
Because I don't think they had things like that when we were there. I mean, that looks very Western.
Stuff.
So that's the tiger, I mean the dragon, right, with that mountain in back of the school. I don't know if the school owned the mountain, maybe they did. And so that was their mascot, the dragon.
The picture on the jacket?
Yeah, with the dragon.
That looks like a dragon.
Yeah. Because the mountain behind the school is called Dragon Mountain. So
and is it actually a dragon?
It's shaped like it's a semicircle that's
not
open on one end. Yeah, it looked like a
real
extinct
Give it a break,
volcano.
bud.
Yeah,
Give
real
it a
dragon.
break.
Actually, Roberta, Rosebud, that's where they took the kids to punish them after Bruce had complained. They go up to the mountain. That's
Yeah.
what they did at Gyeongnam High School. They went up to the mountain.
Is that right? They went up in the mountains.
They
Yeah,
probably made him
because-
come to my school and sit in a girls' classroom, you know, like
Yeah.
Tom Sawyer.
Yeah. That mountain, we spent a lot of time in that mountain planting trees.
Wow, that's
good.
interesting.
That would be like your school excursion. Everybody had to go up there and work for 4 hours planting trees.
What
And
an
it worked. The mountains now
Yeah,
have
it's
lots of
incredible.
trees.
It's incredible.
Yeah. This city right now is unrecognizable. It's radically changed. It's becoming very urban and dense. Nothing but condos. And you know that area you talked about, the bridge that they built? There's bridges all over the place now, connecting all these small islands because it's a big tourist area, because it's so picturesque.
beautiful.
Yeah.
Are there
Really
foreign
beautiful.
tourists?
Oh yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
Huh. Interesting.
Yeah,
Well,
and now
Korea,
they could-
Korea now is encouraging foreign tourism tremendously.
Yeah, and the
Yeah.
exchange rate is great right now for.
Is that
dollars.
right? Awesome.
1,400.
Wow. Isn't that like Japan too, right? The yen
Yeah,
is
same
really
for
weak
Japan.
to the dollar.
Well, folks, it's 11:30 now.
Okay.
Oh wow.
Why don't we thank Bruce
Yeah,
for
that's
Thank you.
awesome.
Thank you.
interesting,
Thank you for listening.
presentation.
you,
Thanks,
Bruce.
Bruce.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
Thank you
for
very much.
listening.
Thank
appreciate
you.
it.
Kamsahamnida.
John